Hi, I am Laurel, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the people closest to you can be the ones who understand you the least. For 15 years, I built a technology empire from my garage, but apparently that was not enough for my perfect family. You see, in the Chin family, education was everything. My older brother Michael was the golden child. Perfect grades, perfect scholastic assessment test scores, and a full ride to Harvard Business School. I was different. Numbers spoke to me differently. While Michael memorized textbooks, I was taking computers apart, learning to code, and dreaming of building something revolutionary. Rachel, you are wasting your potential, Mom would say, shaking her head as I worked on computers in our garage instead of applying to colleges. Look at your brother already preparing for his Master of Business Administration, and you are just tinkering. The tinkering they dismissed, it became Chin Solutions, now valued at $100 million. But let me start from the beginning. 15 years ago, while Michael was starting his first year at Harvard, I dropped out of community college. The day I told my parents, "You think I committed a crime?" Dad, a respected professor at Stanford, could not even look at me. Mom cried for weeks. Michael, home for spring break, just smirked. "Well, sister, I guess someone has to be the family disappointment," he said, straightening his Harvard sweater. "Do not worry when I am running a Fortune 500 company. I will give you a job in the mailroom." That night, in my tiny garage workspace, surrounded by circuit boards and half-finished prototypes, I made a promise to myself. I would succeed not by following their path, but by creating my own. The first few years were brutal. While Michael posted photos from glamorous Master of Business Administration networking events, I was sleeping on a futon in my one-room office, living on ramen noodles and coffee. But I had something they could not see, a vision. I had identified a massive gap in the cybersecurity market. While big companies were focusing on complex, expensive solutions, small businesses were left vulnerable. I developed Security Shield, a simple but powerful security suite that small businesses could actually afford and understand. The first version was rough, but it worked. Word spread. One small business became 10, then 100. By year 3, we had our first $1 million contract. Did my family notice? Sure, but not in the way you would expect. "Cute little business you've got there, Rachel," Michael said during Thanksgiving dinner that year, "but you really should consider getting a proper education. You cannot build aerial company without proper credentials." Mom nodded eagerly. "It is not too late to go back to school, honey. Michael could help you apply to some good business schools." I just smiled and focused on my turkey. Let them think what they wanted. I was too busy scaling my company to argue. The next decade flew by. Chin Solutions expanded globally. We developed new products, acquired smaller companies, and became a leader in small business cybersecurity. Our client list grew to include some Fortune 500 companies. Ironic considering Michael's old taunt. Speaking of Michael, his career was also advancing. He climbed a corporate ladder at a prestigious consulting firm, making partner by 35. Every family gathering became a showcase for his achievements. Michael just closed a $15 million deal. Michael has been featured in Business Weekly. Michael is living at Kino at Harvard. My success, it was always qualified. Rachel's company is doing well considering the considering part always hung in the air. Considering she's a dropout. Considering she has no formal training. Considering she is not Michael. Then came last week, Michael's promotion party. He had been named Chief Executive Officer of his consulting firm's technology division. And Mom and Dad threw a lavish celebration at the Ritz-Carlton. The who is who of Silicon Valley was there, including many of my own clients and competitors. Not that my parents knew that. I arrived early, wearing a simple black dress that Mom immediately criticized. "Could you not have made more of an effort? This is an important night for your brother." The evening proceeded as expected, a parade of speeches praising Michael's brilliance, his credentials, his potential. Then Michael clinked his glass for the big announcement. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, flashing his perfect smile. "As many of you know, I have just been named Chief Executive Officer of our technology division. But that is not the only exciting news." He paused for effect, his eyes finding mine across the room. "I am pleased to announce that we will be expanding aggressively into the small business cybersecurity market." In fact, his smile turned predatory. "I am hoping to acquire my sister's little company Aceware First Move. It is time for Chin Solutions to have real qualified leadership." The room erupted in murmurs. I sat frozen as Michael continued. "Let us be honest. In today's market, you need proper credentials to compete. My sister has done adequately considering her limitations. But it is time for Chin Tech to evolve." "Rachel," he turned to face me directly. As your brother, I am offering you a graceful exit. Let the professionals take over before your lack of education ruins everything you have built. I looked at Dad, who was beaming with pride at Michael's business acumen. Mom was already gushing to her friends about how wonderful it would be to have both children at the same company. The room waited for my response. Michael smirked. He expected me to graciously accept, to finally admit that he was right all along. Instead, I stood up slowly, smoothed my inadequate dress, and walked to the podium. "Thank you for the interesting offer, Michael," I said quietly. "I will have my response ready first thing tomorrow morning." Then I walked out, leaving behind the whispers and stares. In my car, I pulled out my phone and began typing emails. It was going to be a long night, but by morning they would learn exactly what a dropout could do. Little did they know, tomorrow would change everything. The next morning dawned bright and clear. I arrived at Chintech's headquarters at 6:00 in the morning, hours before our usual start time. As I walked through the quiet offices, I touched the sleek glass walls and modern workstations, everything I built from nothing while my family was busy doubting me. At precisely 9 in the morning, the elevator doors opened. Michael strolled in, followed by Dad and two men in expensive suits, presumably his company's lawyers. His triumphant smile faltered slightly when he saw me sitting calmly at the conference room table. "Rachel," he said, straightening his custom-made tie. "I am glad you are here. These are our attorneys. They have prepared the acquisition paperwork. I think you will find our offer very generous considering my limitations." I finished for him, smiling. "Please sit down. I have some documents of my own to share." They settled into the leather chairs, Michael already reaching for what he assumed were resignation papers. Instead, I opened my laptop and connected it to the room's main screen. "Before we discuss your offer, there are a few things you should know about my little company." I began pulling up the first document. "This is Chint's current valuation, $100 million as verified by 3 independent firms last month." Michael's smirk wavered. "That is impossible. Our research showed your research," I cut him off, "was based on public records that are intentionally incomplete. You see, while you were collecting degrees, I was collecting patents. Chincheek holds over 200 proprietary security algorithms. The visible company, the one you tried to acquire, that is just the tip of the iceberg." I clicked to the next slide. "These are our client lists. Notice anything interesting?" Dad leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. His face palled as he read the names, including Michael's own consulting firm. "That is right," I continued. "Your company's entire cybersecurity infrastructure runs on our systems has for years. In fact, I pulled up another document. That $50 million deal you are so proud of, Michael? The client chose your firm specifically because you promised them Tin Security Suite." Michael's face had turned an interesting shade of gray. "But that is impossible. I would have known, would you?" I asked softly. "Did you ever actually look into who developed these security systems you have been selling? Or did you just assume, like always, that anything I touched could not possibly be important?" The lawyers were frantically flipping through their papers, realizing their due diligence had missed something massive. "I was not done yet, and here is the most interesting part," I said, displaying the final document. "Remember that graceful exit you offered me? Well, I have a counterproposal." I slid folders across the table to each of them. "Chintech just acquired your consulting firm's entire technology division. The board approved it last night unanimously. They were particularly impressed by our new quantum encryption technology. Something your due diligence also missed." Michael practically ripped open the folder, his hands shaking. "This is a joke. The board would never. The board that consists mainly of Chint's tech clients?" I asked innocently. "The same board that depends on our security systems to protect billions in assets. That board." Dad was staring at me like he had never seen me before. One of the lawyers had already pulled out his phone, presumably confirming my claims. "So here is what is going to happen," I continued, my voice steady. "You have two options, Michael. Option 1, you resign from the technology division effective immediately. You will receive a generous severance package and a glowing recommendation for any non-competing industry. And option 2, he whispered, is arrogance finally cracking? Option 2, I release the records of how your division has been taking credit for Chintech innovations for years. I am sure Harvard Business Review would love that story. Ivy League chief executive officer caught passing off sister's work as his own." The room fell silent. Through the glass walls, I could see employees arriving, watching the scene with curious eyes. "You would not," Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We are family. Family?" He laughed softly. "Last night you called me unqualified, inadequate, and limited. You tried to steal my company in front of everyone we know. That is not family, Michael. That is just bad business. Dad finally found his voice. Rachel, surely we can discuss this. Your brother did not mean. He meant every word. I cut him off. Just like you meant it every time you dismissed my work as tinkering. Just like Mom meant it every time she suggested my success was just luck. I stood up, smoothing my dress. The same inadequate one from last night. The acquisition papers are legally binding. The press release goes out in an hour. Your choice, Michael. Quiet retirement or public scandal. 20 minutes later, I watched from my office window as Michael stormed out of the building. Dad hurrying after him. The lawyer stayed behind to work out the details of his resignation. That evening, Mom called crying about how I destroyed Michael's career. I let it go to voicemail. Instead, I focused on the email I had just received. Harvard Business School wanted me to give their commencement speech next spring. The topic, Innovation Without Limits, Success Beyond Traditional Paths. I accepted the invitation with a small smile, already planning what I would say. After all, I had quite a story to tell. The next year brought changes none of them expected. Ching. Text value tripled after we went public. Michael found a job in real estate far from technology. Dad retired, finally understanding that credentials do not always equal competence. We still see each other at holidays, maintaining a careful distance that masks wounds that may never fully heal. Sometimes late at night, I look at old family photos and feel a twinge of sadness for what we lost. But then I remember Michael's smirk, Dad's dismissal, Mom's constant doubts, and I remember that respect is earned, not granted by degrees. These days when I speak at technology conferences, I often catch whispers. That is Laurel, the dropout. Go. They never finish the sentence, but they do not have to. My success speaks for itself. Last week, I received an invitation to speak at Michael's old consulting firm's annual retreat. The topic, recognizing innovation, looking beyond traditional metrics. I accepted with a smile, remembering the night they thought Dropout could not possibly build something worthwhile. As I write this from my office overlooking Silicon Valley, I am reminded of something my first mentor told me. Success is not about proving others wrong. It is about proving yourself right. She was right. But sometimes, just sometimes, doing both feels pretty good. The company continues to grow, pushing boundaries and breaking new ground. But more importantly, I found peace with my path. Sometimes the best revenge is not about destroying others. It is about soaring so high they cannot help but see their own weaknesses. After all, not all college lovers are created equal, and not all achievement stories follow the expected path. Sometimes the biggest successes come from those who dare to write their own rules. And as for Michael's Harvard Master of Business Administration, it looks great on his wall. Right next to the real estate license he had to get after trying to take the wrong little company from the wrong unqualified sister. Do not forget to subscribe to Love Chris Stories and tell us your favorite part in the comments.